Hello everybody, thank you for joining our Primary Languages MOOC. We were thrilled to read all your comments and reflections. It's so interesting to find out more about your context, your thoughts about language learning and teaching, and your actual classroom practice. We love that you're sharing ideas with each other and responding to each other's posts too. There are some great themes that run through your comments on the different steps, and we thought we'd share these with you and add some reflections of our own. So first of all, there were lots of comments about whether children have a natural ability for language learning. Some of you felt very positive about children's progress and how children seem to learn languages without much effort. Others, however, were a bit more circumspect about perceptions around whether younger is actually better. Elizabeth, for example, noted that children can develop a good foreign language accent or native-like pronunciation. But both she and A. Tate felt that they can still find language learning hard, that it doesn't seem to appear effortless. Elizabeth felt this could be linked to developing metacognitive skills, the skills that are about knowing how to learn. Remember, a key distinction we need to make here is, are the children learning in a classroom with a few hours of instruction per week, or are they in a context where they are immersed in a new language? These two conditions, these two different contexts for learning are very different and matter. This idea that language learning is hard resonated with Elizabeth and Preston, who suggested that there are significant differences between children's learning, because language are not necessarily easy for them, and we'd agree with you here. There's plenty of research which has been conducted in schools which shows that across classes and cohorts, children generally can make good progress, but when we look at test scores in more detail, we find that there is often fairly marked disparities in performances. Interestingly, we are also developing an understanding from research that there might be predictors which affect learning outcomes. So far, alongside what we call affective variables, for example, motivation or self-efficacy, we find particularly in young learner settings that foreign language outcomes can be influenced by verbal working memory and L1 literacy. But to conclude on this section, younger is not necessarily better. And I will now hand over to Suzanne.
Thank you, Florence. So let's think now about the question of whether do all children love language learning? And again, there were some mixed opinions here. Your realities of that mixed picture are very much supported by research, which suggests that this is indeed a complex picture. So Cindy, for example, says that her learners range from the ever eager to pulling teeth or having to coax learners to be involved in the languages classroom. And she wonders whether young learners really appreciate the benefits of language learning. We'd argue that this awareness of their benefits in the form of the usefulness of languages or their importance in the longer term can appear in primary school, but that generally happens during upper primary, perhaps as we might expect. One thing that is on our side in the primary languages classroom, however, can be a lack of anxiety. So Sarah S., Lucas and Patricia all notice that younger learners can be freer from adolescent and teenage inhibitions. Elizabeth likewise recalls her fear of speaking as an adolescent because of peer pressure. Anna Brigido worries that young learners start with a fair amount of curiosity, but then they start to lose their motivation after the first few years. And this has been backed up by evidence in school-based research in the UK and in Europe too. So far then, we know that younger learners are not necessarily guaranteed to be better at language learning in classrooms, and that likewise their motivation can vary, both inter and intra-individual. It's worth remembering, however, that overall, generally, young learners do tend to be very enthusiastic about language learning. So I'm now going to pass on to Alison.
Thanks, Suzanne. So this all means that teachers and teaching practices are paramount in supporting language learning for young children. Like Hader and Alberto, who acknowledge the importance of an enthusiastic teacher with good classroom routines, research has shown us that teacher confidence and teacher linguistic proficiency are important factors in young language learner progression. Fatima sums this up beautifully when she mentions that learners need to be led to a proper destination by a good mentor. The idea that children have a clear, well-planned and structured learning journey is important and something that we will explore more in the coming weeks. Your comments indicate that you know the importance of planning motivating and engaging lessons. Noor and Ian really get their learners involved in language practice activities by encouraging them to draw, for example. This factors in a level of effective engagement and learner motivation and learner involvement. Chanda uses dance, dress and songs. Yorita notes that children love exploration. Sarah Jane and Jennifer use gesture, more on that next week. Christina and others say that they're going to use Claire's emotion board from one of the teacher stories. You identified how the use of another language can be a disguise, as Caroline put it, acting as a safe space to talk about feelings. Thank you for joining us for the first week of our MOOC. We hope that you've enjoyed the journey so far, and we're really looking forward to hearing more about your thoughts, reflections and practices over the coming week.